YouTube Battle community, Beach Boys fans, random people on the internet. My name is Giggens, and we're here today to talk about the Beach Boys' 1976 album, 15 Big Ones, released on Brother Records, distributed by Warner Brothers and Reprise. Not again. The backstory behind this album is a long one, and this has been a little bit in the works to make sure I do this right, do this justice, because this album, while it's definitely got its fair share of faults, I feel like has a certain bit of appeal to it, and there's a long backstory, so let's just jump in. So, this album came out in 1976. The Beach Boys, up until 1973, actually, post Pet Sounds. Pet Sounds was like the end of an era, then you had Smiley Smile, right up to Holland. The band was a totally different group. They had spent all that time working so hard to sort of not put the past behind them, but not rely on their old hits, and show that they had the writing chops that they can do it themselves without Brian. In the late 60s and early 70s, Brian was becoming increasingly more reclusive and just disinterested in the Beach Boys as a whole. Just did not care about being in the Beach Boys or having anything to do with them. And so by the time you get to Sunflower, Surf's Up, even Carl and the Passions, and then the Holland album, you've got a body of work that completely stands on its own as a whole different era of the Beach Boys, basically sans Brian. And it's fantastic. It's probably one of the best eras of their career. They put out some of the best work they ever did. All of them are writing, all of them are firing on all cylinders, all of them are at the top of their game, and getting better and better as they were doing it. Flash forward to 1974. At this point, the Beach Boys have proven themselves to be a humongous concert draw, pulling in thousands and thousands of people a night. 15, almost, Endless Summer, the Greatest Hits album comes out. That's, let me show you what that looks like in case you forgot what it looks like. Endless Summer comes out, right? This is a Greatest Hits album that takes care of all their big hits from 1962 to 1965. Mike Love says, hey, Capitol, don't just call it Beach Boys Greatest Hits Volume 17, call it Endless Summer. That way it sounds like a new album, it's got a big double LP set, cool artwork with them currently as they looked, and it became a gigantic smash seller and spent most of 1974 on the charts, actually the next 3 years on the charts, and was number one for a very long time, and completely reintroduced fans to the Beach Boys that either grew up having missed the original part in the 60s when they were, a big 60s group, or were into their new stuff, but then maybe didn't know about those old songs because maybe they were out of print or something. So, needless to say, this album catapulted them to the top of the charts and made their concert appearances even more in demand than they already were. So, because of that, things start firing up here at Warner Brothers Records, and they're like, oh man, we gotta get something out to capitalize on this. Like, what are we gonna do? We need to get on this because Capitol's making money off our band from their old songs. Meanwhile, Bruce Johnson had left the band. Ricky was about to leave the band at the end of 1974, literally because he felt like going to play with Joe Walsh's band. He was like, hey Carl, I'm out of here, so this is what I'm going to do, and I'm doing it. So he did. He left. Blondie left at the end of 1973, so by this point you're basically down to the original Beach Boys. And Warner Brothers was like, alright, we gotta get something going here. So, throughout 1974, the Beach Boys recorded a bunch of songs, most of which have never been released. Songs like Share Your Love is a song that Ricky did in January. Carl ended up doing a bunch of things he would just call Carl's guitar riff or Carl's Moog riff or something. Good Timin' was a song that they did in 1974 that eventually came out many years later. Ding Dang, early version of that was called Clangin'. Eventually came out on Love You. Is It Really Love? That song dates back to 1974 too, that Brian did on his solo album, the live one at the Roxy, I think. And Battle Hymn of the Republic, there's a song called Hard Times, Don't Let Me Go, Our Life, Our Love, Our Land, Foolin', there's a song called Drum Song that Ricky did. They did Shortening Bread. For some reason, that redid Marcella at some point. Here Comes Santa Claus, an early version of It's Okay. And then a couple of songs actually got copyrighted, like California Feeling, You're Riding High on Music, and Lucy Jones, all in 1974. The only thing that was recorded and released was a song called Child of Winter, back with Susie Cincinnati. It was an older song at that point that was unreleased. That was the only thing that came out. and it came out like 3 days before Christmas, so of course it wasn't going to chart. There was a super limited amount pressed of these things, and zero promotion, and very weird distribution. So it's a super hard to find 45 from what I figured out over these years. Anyway, 1974 proved fruitless, also because a lot of the stuff they recorded was at Caribou Ranch, which apparently burned down, and so whatever tapes they had left over had been moved over to Brothers Studios, where they are going to continue working on things. So a lot of tapes have been lost from that era. 1975 proved basically the Beach Boys just stand on the road. Stand on the road, and Capitol was like, hey, let's do this all over again, and boom, Spirit of America came out, which is basically Endless Summer Part 2, filling in the gaps. The biggest draw for this thing probably is Breakaway, because at that point it had only been a single, so to have it on an album for the first time is pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, overall, this is a really great set. It did well in the charts. It was another big seller for them, so again, summer of 75, proving to be a big summer for them. They ended up going out on tour with Chicago. They were just all over the map at this point. But the recording was coming down to a trickle. I mean, most of 75 was Dennis working on his own songs. Like, he was continuing to work on stuff. Like, he did River Song, I think, in 74. And then he did Pacific Ocean Blues, and a song called Old Man Booze, a song called Rainbows. And the Beach Boys eventually did do a couple of songs like Come Go With Me, a very early version of that. And Brian did a version of a song called Come to the Sunshine with Van Dyke Parks. So that's weird. Also in this time, like, Brian had met Elvis again in the studio because Elvis was doing his thing. And Johnny Rivers, I think, did a cover of Help Me Rhonda, which Brian actually came down and sang backup vocals on. And because of the Chicago thing, like the Beach Boys in the Chicago became pretty good friends. And so they sang on Wishing You Were Here. It was Al, Carl, and Dennis were on Wishing You Were Here. Bruce and Carl were on Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me by Elton John around this time. So their vocals were still all over the radio, even though they weren't having a new song under their own name. But yeah, most of 75 proved pretty fruitless with recording up until early 76 when everything started to come together for this album, and then a handful of tracks that eventually became Love You the year after. Honkin' on the Highway was recorded with Billy Hinchy doing a vocal of it, and a bunch of songs that were cover versions that didn't end up on this thing, like Mony Mony on Broadway, Shake, Rattle, and Roll that Carl and Brian each did their own version, like a lead vocal version of. Michael rowed the boat ashore, like weird stuff. Anyways, the deal was, hey, we need Brian back in the group. They came up with this gigantic promotional campaign called Brian's Back, and this cheesy song that Mike wrote came out, and there was this big celebration, and they basically dragged him back on tour. Brian's wife, Marilyn, eventually found Dr. Landy, and, because he had helped, like, Alice Cooper and a bunch of other bands and artists, and thought he might help Brian. So, because Brian at this point was up to like 240 pounds, he wasn't shaving, he wasn't taking a bath, he was in pretty rough shape. Wasn't making music. And so, combination of get Brian out of the house, get Brian creative, we need a new album out, we need something to do with Brian, we need a producer credit that says Brian Wilson on it, the whole package. And so, they're like, alright, let's just get this straightened out. Let's get Brian into therapy, we'll get him cleaned up, he'll come on tour with us, he'll write some songs, we'll do a brand new album. Boom, Beach Boys are back. That was the game plan. Brian shows up to the studio. He's like, hey, we're going to do an album of standards. We're just going to do some oldies. And a couple of guys are like, that's not a good idea. And a couple of guys are like, we need to get this out as soon as possible. Just make this album. Let's get it out. Or, strike while the iron's hot. Carl and Dennis are like, no, we got to do another original album, like new Brian Wilson originals, just like we used to. Or, one of the most fascinating parts about this is how it's funny because the record companies just automatically assumed, I guess, that, oh, Brian's back? Well, who cares what else the other guys have written? Like, oh, Dennis wrote, like, Wouldn't It Be Nice to Live Again? And, there's, like, Long Promised Road and, Feel Flows and, all these amazing songs, Only With You, Marcella. Like, oh, Brian's back? Who cares what the other guys wrote? This is what's important. So Dennis actually called the recording of this album a bruising experience because they got pushed to the side. Just because Brian was back and he was in no shape to be back. He wasn't ready. And, it's sad watching those videos basically shoving him out on stage where he'd sit behind a piano scared to death and just play in front of, 50,000 people. It's sad. But they came to an agreement. It was going to be an album, a mixture of oldies and newies. And they called it 15 Big Ones because Brian's original name for the album, Group Therapy, was vetoed. So 15 Big Ones, 15 years as a band, 15 songs on the album. That's the whole thing, man. They did a big NBC TV special, showing them, recording the album. Brian had his 34th birthday, so Paul and Linda McCartney were there. There was a big cake. Dan Aykroyd and Jim Belushi did this funny skit where they made Brian go surfing. It was really well done on that scale. So that was pretty cool. Their promotion at this time was actually really well documented. They were a big band, even if their albums, going forward weren't going to sell as much. Ever since that point, they've been a big commercial draw. But Endless Summer came out, and the Beach Boys made this creative decision, hey, I guess we're just going to go out and play the Endless Summer songs, because that's what people want. And Carl and Dennis were just not happy about that. They wanted the band to progress and have new music and show off that they weren't going to rely on their oldies. And unfortunately, that never happened ever again. It was always their oldies after that. So to think what may have been. But anyways, this album came out in 1976 and was their best charting album since Pet Sounds. And Rock and Roll Music, the lead-off song of this thing, went to number 5. It was their best-selling single since Good Vibrations 10 years earlier. So, commercially, this thing put them back on the map. And the Beach Boys knew it was light, they knew it was fluffy stuff. Brian even admitted that there was nothing deep and heavy on it. He said, well, our next album's going to be more masterpiece stuff. We're going to, better Good Vibrations on the next album, which got pretty close. But they knew this was like fluff. And it's a mixed bag. I mean, there's some really, really great rock and roll tracks, there's some cool covers. Some of the originals are actually really good. But some of the backing tracks on this thing date back to like 1970, like Susie Cincinnati and Back Home. These are like old songs with Brian's old voice, and Bruce Johnson's singing away, and Ricky Furtar's on drums with some of this stuff. So it's like, it's all over the place. But an interesting album. So here's what the inside looks like. Kind of cool. It's just got pictures of them, throughout the years. Some old pictures, some new pictures. I've always liked this one of Brian in the pool holding his Endless Summer plaque there. But let's just jump into this album review because we are already like 15 minutes in here. Rock and Roll Music, the lead-off song on this thing. Basically, Mike came over to Brian's house one day and he was like, hey, we did Surfing USA in the style of Sweet Little 16. Why not do another Chuck Berry song? And Brian was like, yeah, let's do it. So they banged out Rock and Roll Music. The reason why they chose a lot of these covers is Brian felt that they were safe. He said, these have already been accepted once, they'll be accepted again. This is my toes in the water of coming back to the fold again. And, he started playing shows. I wrote this down because I thought this was fascinating. His first show with the band was July 2nd, 1976. It was the first time he was on stage since April of 1973, but his first full show since November 4th, 1970, when he was doing the whiskey gigs, when Mike had the flu or something. And so Brian actually filled in with the guys and played this tiny little Whiskey A Go-Go. Now he's, back to 17, 20,000, 35,000 people a night. Crazy jump. Rock and Roll Music is an interesting song. For me, sometimes I absolutely love it. Sometimes I'm like completely sick of it. And then sometimes I'm like, that's so Brian. That roll, rockin' and a roll. Like, that's so Brian. I think Mike's vocals on it are fantastic. I love the drums. I love the gritty guitar. Even some of that spacey, cartoony organ synthesizer in the background that eventually would be used to full effect on Love You. It really is a classic Beach Boys song. They used to end their concerts with this, or pretty close to the end of their concerts, knowing it was a fun track and it would fit in with Fun and Barbara Ann and stuff like that. It's okay. This song peaked at like number 28 or 29, and it should have been a bigger hit, but it came out at the end of the summer, and it would have been perfect if it came out like in April and had some steam to build up and, get on the charts and get on the radio by May or June and spend some decent life during the summer months on the radio. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case, but it's an absolutely smash hit of a song, if you ask me, that should have been a classic Beach Boys track. Most of it was recorded in 1974. Overdubs and stuff happened in 76. They revisited it. But it's a perfect, sunny, fun vibe kind of a song. Great background vocals on this song. I absolutely love the background vocals. They have that kind of like mature angel sound to their voice, which I like a lot. I really love the chorus, the yeah thing. Dennis doing that "Find a Ride" thing at the end. It's just a fun song, really cool song. Had to Phoney has got this like 30s vibe to it. I can almost see like the Gershwin influence on this one a little bit with that oboe sound, you know. But a bunch of them take turns singing on this one. It's Mike, Carl, and Dennis, and I love the interplay with the voices when they do that, and which would be used again to greater effect on "Love You," which is almost like a Wilson Brothers solo album. Yeah, the alternating U's are pretty cool. It sounds like the record's stuck for a little bit, and then Brian's got that "Come on and answer the phone" line at the end. And that's like his introduction to this album vocally. You get to hear his new voice, which apparently he said was laryngitis. I mean, if you sit around smoking cigarettes in bed for 3 years not singing, then that might also allude to it, but regardless, he may have been sick. They did kind of force him in regardless of his thoughts just to get the album done. So if he was sick, then that's just what was going to have to go down. Going to the Chapo, this is Brian's first lead on the album, and it's really not bad. I mean, all the synthesizers on it make it sound ahead of its time. Like, it kind of sticks out like a sore thumb to me on this one. You know, musically speaking to other things around at that time, I guess. But I love how he does his own backup vocals on this song. I think it's pretty cool. Everyone's in Love with You. I actually really, really dig this song. I think it's one of Mike's best vocals. Really sweet, really tender kind of ballad. Good background vocals again. Really totally soft rock feel, soft acoustic guitars. The harps are on it. I like that one. Talk to Me is this like big sweeping 50s-esque production. Finally Carl is on the album doing a lead. It's got that cool waltz feel. It's just again dripping with synths, but then it's got that quick transition to the you know, that middle bit, which I really enjoy. That same song, that was okay. It's never really done anything for me. I do like the breaks at the end with the sweeping strings. I think that's kind of unique. TM song ends side 1, and that's a really weird harmonic structure. I think Al wrote this song, but he sings it. Kind of trippy. It does this whole like really fast, 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 and then really slow, slow, slow part, which is fun. Super quick, super short song. Side 2 starts off with Palisades Park, and I really enjoy this cover. Carl sings this one, does the lead on this whole thing, and, you know, great fun vibe, fun spirit. It's got that carnival-esque summer fair feel, which I kind of enjoy. Slide guitars are good, the sax is good on it, and solid background vocals. I've read a lot of reviews about this album saying the background vocals suck, and that they're, like, under-rehearsed. I don't know, I'm not feeling that. I think they're really good. So, just my opinion. Susie Cincinnati. I'm always hit or miss with this song too. It's got a good rockin' vibe. I love the ending of it. I love the loose spirit that it's got. Not my favorite song on the album by far, but it's good to have another Al song on here. I don't think it fits stylistically because the music was recorded like 7 years before this thing came out. So, just my opinion. It's okay. And for some reason, that was like the chosen B-side for like 3 years. Every single that came out, it's Susie Cincinnati on the B-side. I don't know who was in charge of that, but they really wanted that as the B-side. A casual look, very doo-wop feel. Mike and Al take turns on this one, and this is okay. It doesn't do much for me. They did play this song live during this tour, though. Blueberry Hill, I would really like this song more if it stayed in that quiet vibe. You know, when the song starts, it's like a real calm bass, just kind of chill thing, and then it jumps into the big 50s-esque production, Happy Days kind of feel. If the song had stayed way more simple and, you know, lo-fi or, you know, stripped down, I think it would have been a way more effective track to have on this album. And a good break to kind of split up the vibe of the synthy, big, heavy stuff. Back Home, again, another old song. I think Brian wrote some of the original lyrics for this like in 1963, and then a lot of this music on Back Home was from 1970. They may have, you know, added some things here and there, like Brian's new voice, obviously. But it's got a big rock vibe. I like the big chorus to it. It's fun. It's a cool song. In the Still of the Night, Dennis sings this one. Like, finally, where has he been this entire album? You know, I think Brian sings the intro a little bit. And it's weird because it's one of those songs when I first heard it for a long time, I thought it was Brian. And then I was like, no, it's Dennis. No, it's Brian. Because at this time, their voices are pretty hard to distinguish between the two. They were really able to sound like each other. I think Brian at this time may have been trying to sound like Dennis, just because Dennis had a cool voice. Great version. I like the drama and the emotion on this one. And the last song on this thing, Just Once in My Life, I think is probably the best song on the album, if you ask me. I think it's absolutely fantastic. Brian and Carl take turns doing the lead on this one, and there's a high emotion, there's pain, there's soul. For me, that's like the absolute winner, is this one on the album. It's one of those ones you wish it would just keep going, because there's like actually like pain in their voice. There's like something's happening here. Yeah. So this album it came out at a time when the Beach Boys were on top of the world. In 1974, 5, and 6, that was some of their biggest concert draws ever. Was at that point, and they were selling places out like crazy. There was some concerts where like 3,000 people had to be turned away because they couldn't get in. And so other countries who were trying to cash in on the Endless Summer and Spirit of America compilations who didn't get those, like England, they got things like this, like the Good Vibrations Best of the Beach Boys, which basically covers like 66 to 73. Good stuff on it though. It opens with Sail On Sailor, and it's got like, you know, add some music to your day, and Surf's Up and Friends, like good stuff on that thing. And there was also oh yeah. So I was gonna say, check this out. This was a recent acquisition actually. This is an original copy, but it's still in the shrink wrap. I mean, it's open, but you can't open the gatefold, so it's still in the shrink from 1976. National Record Mart. Wherever that store was, and whoever bought this, thank you, because now it's in my collection forever. Yeah, so overall, my thoughts on this album are a little mixed. And I go back and forth on it a lot, because on one hand, it's cool. Brian's in the band again, and he's having like a big say in what's going on. Another part of me is like, he shouldn't have done this. Because when you're coming off beautiful albums like Sunflower, Surf's Up, Holland, and you're showing your strength, and you're singing about important world subjects like ecology and making sure the earth is taken care of, and really deep lyrics like Feel Flows or Long Promised Road, even add some music to your day, or songs like Cool Cool Water, just these beautiful, hypnotizing, trippy moments. And then it just comes to a screeching halt only because your past came back to haunt you, and now we're back to like this like overproduced, overpolished, like forced sound. You know, and a handful of the guys in the band were really unhappy with this album when it came out, but it came out basically to capitalize on the Beach Boys being a big draw, and it sold extremely well. So yeah, it's a tough call. I mean, the only good thing about it, I guess you can say, is that it did get Brian back into the chair, and so maybe without this, you would have never got the Beach Boys' Love You. So maybe we have this to thank for Love You coming out after this, which is easily one of their best albums and one of my favorites. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say about this one. This is a kind of a long video, but there was a lot to say. There's a big story behind this album, and yeah, I don't think they do anything from this album live anymore. That they might do rock and roll music sometimes, like, you know, the Mike Love touring version, but other than that, it's kind of forgotten about. I think it may have been huge for its time, but I don't think it had staying power beyond the logo. the logo stayed, that was it. Yeah, but first produced by Brian Wilson album since Pet Sounds. And they all grew beards. So there's some nice pictures of them with beards. I mean, some of them just look so, like, Mike doesn't look like he wants to be there. Carl looks pissed off. Oh, Dennis is smiling, that's good. Yeah, Brian looks good. He's got a good smile going on there. So yeah, so much more I could probably add to this, but this has already been a long video, and I'll just continue it whenever I do my Love You review, which is going to happen at some point. That's a really special album, and I need to take time to just carefully craft that. So there's a document on YouTube of some well-researched Beach Boys Love You facts. Thank you for watching. My name is Giggens. This has been the Beach Boys 15 Big Ones album review, released in 1976. So let me know what you guys think about it. You know, tell me what you think. Do you like it? Do you hate it? You know, what do you think how do you think this album impacted their career going forward? I want to know. So that's it. My name is Giggens. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye. How do you turn this off? There we go. Bye-bye.